I stared at the lease papers, shaking in my hands, feeling the blood in my veins turn to ice. My own home had been rented to strangers while I was dodging fire in Afghanistan. HOA President Valerie Kingsley had fabricated documents claiming I'd abandoned the property, then leased it for $2, $8,000 a month, and kept every cent. She was pocketing rent on my father's house where 3 generations of my family had lived while I served abroad. I couldn't help but laugh standing in my driveway at 2 a.m., watching unknown people unload into my childhood bedroom. These suburban strong-arms thought they could target deployed soldiers and hide behind bogus legal clout. But here's what Valerie didn't realize. I wasn't just any service member. I had 7 combat-hardened brothers who just pulled leave to come home and show this HOA what happens when you cross military families. Oh, this was going to be glorious. What would you do if strangers were living in your home? Drop a comment. You're about to see the most satisfying HOA beatdown in history. Let me rewind and explain how I landed here. My name's Noah Delgado, and I'm a 3rd-generation Army man. My grandfather fought in Korea, my father served 2 tours in Vietnam, and me? I've been playing cat and mouse with insurgents in Afghanistan for most of the last decade. I inherited this house 2 years back when my dad lost his battle with cancer. It's nothing extravagant, just a 1970s ranch sitting on 1.25 acres in suburban Colorado. The kind of place where you can still hear coyotes calling at night and neighbors wave as they drive past. My father paid it off after 30 years of construction work. Every nail and board chosen with the stubborn pride of a man who believed in honest labor. 5 years ago, the area incorporated, and suddenly we had an HOA. I grumbled about it, but Dad reminded me, sometimes you've got to play along to get along. So I signed the papers, paid the dues, and thought that was the end of it. I should have known better. The leather tool belt he left behind still hangs in the garage, smooth from decades of calloused hands. Walking the property line, I can still hear the crunch of gravel under his boots and his voice reminding me to measure twice, cut once. Those aren't just memories. They're the foundation of who I am. Then I crossed paths with Valerie Kingsley. Valerie, or Val, as she insisted everyone call her, was 52 years old with a blonde bob so perfect it could have been engineered by Germans. She drove a pearl-white Lexus SUV with vanity plates, never met a pastel outfit she didn't adore, and lived in an $800,000 faux McMansion with her dentist husband. She spoke in that syrupy tone that sounded like kindness but left a bitter aftertaste. 3 years ago, she got herself elected HOA president, and that's when everything started sliding downhill. Valerie had her own vision for what our neighborhood should look like, one that didn't seem to include modest ranch homes owned by single soldiers who were away more than they were home. 6 months into deployment, I got a certified letter that nearly sent my blood pressure through the roof, even in the Afghan heat. A $2, $4,000 assessment for a new community center. Now, I support improvements, but when I checked the breakdown, it smelled worse than a latrine in August. My little ranch was being charged the same as the $250,000 homes down the road. I sent a polite email asking if the assessment could be adjusted or if I could set up a payment plan. Valerie's reply arrived 3 days later, dripping with disdain. Mr. Delgado, military service does not exempt anyone from community obligations. Payment is due in full within 30 days or legal action will be pursued. Legal action against a deployed soldier for a community center I never wanted and would rarely use. I arranged my military pay to cover mortgage, utilities, and upkeep automatically. My 73-year-old neighbor, Mrs. Huang, who still brought me homemade dumplings, promised to check the house monthly. I thought everything was covered. I was wrong. The violations started small. Grass half an inch too long, mailbox painted the wrong shade of beige. An unauthorized vehicle when Mrs. Huang's grandson used my driveway during a family cookout. Each violation came with a $50 daily fine that stacked faster than payday loan interest. But the moment that broke me came during a video call when Mrs. Huang mentioned she saw Valerie standing in my driveway, hands on her hips, telling another woman she was tired of eyesore houses dragging down property values. My father's home, where 3 generations of my family had lived and served, an eyesore. That's when I knew this wasn't about grass or mailboxes. It was personal. By month 8 of my deployment, I opened my email to a nightmare. 23 violation notices. 23. Petty charges that would have embarrassed a parking officer. Unauthorized vehicle for Mrs. Huang's grandson's visit. Landscaping non-compliance because dandelions dared to grow. Structural disrepair for a paint chip the size of a coin. Each violation carried a $50 daily fine. Do the math. 23 violations, $50 each, over 30 days. That's $34,500 in penalties. But the worst blow came when Mrs. Huang called me crying. This woman who had survived the Cultural Revolution, who had raised 5 children as a single mother, who had never once asked for help, was sobbing. "Noah, they gave me papers. That woman says I can't step on your property anymore. She says I'm trespassing." Trespassing for looking after a deployed soldier's home. That's when I knew I had to fight back. I reached out to the Military Legal Assistance Office at Fort Bramhall. That's where I learned about the Service Members Civil Relief Act, SCRA for short. It's a federal law that shields active duty personnel from predatory civil actions, delays court proceedings, and reduces pre-service debt interest rates. Bottom line, you can't legally steamroll deployed soldiers with bogus fines while they're under fire overseas. I sent Valerie a certified letter invoking my SCRA protections, demanding all violations and fines be frozen immediately. I also filed a complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's office. Two could play the legal game, and I'd picked up a few lessons in strategy during my years in uniform. For about a week, I thought I'd won. The violations stopped, the threats paused. I finally slept a full night without dreaming about $50 dandelions. Then came the next twist. Valerie struck back with a 47-page property maintenance agreement that made my stomach churn. She claimed my father had signed it back in 2019, just months before his cancer diagnosis. According to this so-called contract, Dad had waived all SCRA protections and granted the HOA emergency authority to manage the property. The paperwork looked suspiciously pristine for a 4-year-old document. Crisp pages, fake aging, and a signature that looked like it had been traced. Yet there it was, my father's name at the bottom, supposedly giving Valerie unlimited control. I sat in my tent in the sweltering Afghan heat, phone in hand, fist trembling with pure rage. She was desecrating my father's memory, falsifying his signature and weaponizing his death against me. She didn't stop there. Valerie brought in a property management company to enforce emergency maintenance. Guess who owned it? Her brother-in-law, Jeff. His main qualification seemed to be owning a riding mower and sharing family dinners with Valerie. He began billing me $400 a week for essential lawn care on a house Mrs. Huang had maintained for free. When I called to protest, Valerie's voice dripped with insincere concern. "Oh, Noah, I know this must be upsetting, but we must protect property values for all residents. Your neighbors shouldn't suffer because of your situation." A situation like serving my country was some sort of flaw in my character. It became a grim joke among my squad. I told my sergeant that fighting insurgents was easier than fighting my HOA. At least insurgents were honest about wanting me gone. Valerie just smiled and mailed invoices. My savings account, once at $8,000, started bleeding dry. Bogus fines, fake maintenance, and legal costs whittled it down to barely $1,200. My paycheck didn't even cover her inflated demands anymore. And then I realized I wasn't alone. Other deployed service members in the neighborhood began reaching out. Valerie had been targeting military families systematically, always when the soldier was overseas, always when they were most vulnerable. That's when I knew this fight wasn't just mine. It was for every service member who had trusted their community to guard their home while they guarded the nation. Valerie's greed wasn't just personal, it was systemic, and she had chosen the wrong soldier to target. By month 11, she escalated again. I opened an email to find a notice of lien filing. The HOA was placing an $18,000 lien on my property for unpaid fines, assessments, and Jeff's inflated maintenance bills. But the kicker came in the letter attached. It revealed her real goal. She wasn't just trying to bankrupt me, she wanted to take the house. "Dear Mr. Delgado," it began, oozing false politeness. "Continued non-compliance will result in foreclosure proceedings. However, the HOA is willing to work with you to resolve this amicably." Several buyers are interested in purchasing your property, sparing you the embarrassment of foreclosure. Translation: Pay up or we'll steal your house and sell it to our friends. Soon, Mrs. Huang reported seeing strangers touring my property with Valerie, clipboard in hand, acting like she already owned it. They walked through rooms, talking rental prices, as though my father's house was theirs. Mrs. Huang, sharp as ever, began secretly photographing everything from her kitchen window. Something told her we'd need that evidence later. I decided to set a trap. I called Valerie, faking defeat in my voice. I can't fight this anymore, I said. I'll sell the house if it clears the debts. Just make me a fair offer and let's end this. I could practically hear her smirk. Oh, Noah, I'm glad you're being reasonable. My brother-in-law Jeff might take it off your hands for, say, $15,000 below market value, considering the repairs and violations. $15,000 below market value for a house needing maybe $300 worth of paint. And here's the irony. Colorado is a one-party consent state. That means I could record the whole conversation legally. Every greedy word out of Valerie's mouth was preserved forever. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for her to walk straight into it. Month 14 brought the kind of gut punch that can crush your faith in humanity. I was in the chow hall, pushing mystery meat around my tray when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Huang. She rarely called during the day, so I knew something was wrong. Her voice shook. Noah, there's a moving truck in your driveway. A family with children. They're moving into your house. My fork clattered onto the tray. What do you mean, moving in? That's impossible. She whispered urgently. That woman, Valerie. She's here with papers. She told them you abandoned the property and she has authority to rent it. My chest tightened as I struggled to process the words. Rent? Rent my house? The house my grandfather had helped my father build? The place where 3 generations of Delgados had lived? Mrs. Huang sent me photos minutes later. A U-Haul in the driveway. Boxes labeled Tommy's room and kitchen stuff. A young couple with 2 small kids carrying belongings through the front door of my father's home. And there was Valerie, clipboard in hand, beaming like a cat that had just stolen the canary. I called the local police. The dispatcher was polite but firm. Sir, if they have a legal lease agreement, this is a civil matter. You'll need to contact an attorney. A legal lease agreement for my own house. Hearing the sound of children's bicycles on the driveway during a video call with Mrs. Huang broke something deep inside me. Not just anger, something heavier. Those kids were innocent victims too, dragged into Valerie's scheme. My commanding officer, Colonel Davis, took one look at me during our next check-in and said, Delgado, you're taking emergency leave. Whatever's happening back home is eating you alive. Within 72 hours, I was on a transport plane back to the States. Military legal assistance connected me with a civilian attorney, a relentless specialist named Rebecca Navarro, who had built her career defending military families against predatory HOAs. When I showed her the lease, she laughed. Noah, this is gold. She just handed us the rope to hang her case. The rental was never approved by the full board. Colorado law requires a majority vote for decisions like this. She acted alone. That makes it not just unethical, but criminal. Rebecca subpoenaed HOA financials, and what we found was a treasure chest of corruption. Valerie had been skimming for years, $47,000 siphoned from bogus assessments, pocketed under administrative costs. Jeff's landscaping company? No valid business license. And the kicker, the rental itself. Valerie was charging the tenants $2,800 a month and pocketing every dollar as repayment toward HOA debts. She even pocketed their $5,600 security deposit. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Handle this wrong and a blameless family would be homeless. Handle it right and we'd expose a criminal enterprise. Local news soon picked up the story. Deployed soldier fights HOA over stolen home. Reporters, veterans groups, and neighbors started calling nonstop. My old drill sergeant phoned from Fort Carson, laughing so hard he nearly choked. Delgado, I hear you're famous, fighting HOAs instead of insurgents. Hell, I always said the suburbs were tougher than the battlefield. Then Rebecca discovered the bombshell that changed everything. She pulled county records and grinned like she'd just drawn a royal flush. "Noah, Valerie just made the mistake of her life. Your HOA doesn't legally exist." I blinked. "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" She pointed at the incorporation filings from 2018. Incomplete, missing signatures, unpaid fees, no proper registration under Colorado statute. "Here's your knowledge nugget," she explained. "An HOA must be properly incorporated to wield authority. Without that, it's nothing but neighbors with clipboards pretending to be powerful. Every lien, every fine, every violation she's issued in 5 years is legally worthless. And that makes every dollar she's collected fraud." But it got worse. Valerie had been running the same scheme on other military families. Forged documents, inflated fines, fake emergency repairs. She had stolen 3 homes this way, profiting over $400,000 by flipping distressed properties. Then Rebecca showed me the smoking gun. An email chain between Valerie and city officials. They discussed cleaning up undesirable military housing and improving community demographics. The coded language was clear as day. It wasn't about property values, it was about who she thought belonged. The FBI's white-collar division was suddenly very interested. Agent Luis Martinez, no relation to me, arranged a meeting. Overnight, I went from a desperate soldier fighting foreclosure to a key witness in a federal fraud investigation. And Valerie? She was still clueless, still sending violation notices, still threatening foreclosure, still convinced she held power. The FBI suggested we let her keep digging deeper. Every false step would add another felony. Every dollar stolen, another fraud count. My father always told me bullies tie their own nooses if you give them enough rope. Valerie had been weaving one for years, and the knot was almost finished. The question was strategic. Do we shut her down immediately, or let her commit a few more crimes to bulletproof the case? I asked, "How many other families are in her sights right now?" Rebecca replied, "At least 6, 3 active duty, 2 deployed." That was my answer. We couldn't let more families suffer while she played dictator. Rebecca smiled. "Good. Agent Martinez has a plan to warn them quietly without tipping her off. We'll protect them while letting her hang herself." For the first time in months, I felt like I was no longer playing defense. I wasn't the prey anymore. Valerie thought she was circling in for the kill. In reality, she was walking right into the biggest trap of her life. The VFW hall on Colfax Avenue smelled like burnt coffee, old tobacco, and raw determination. At 0600 on a Saturday, 8 of my brothers in arms sat around a folding table piled high with documents, laptops, and enough caffeine to fuel a small war. They had all pulled leave to come home and help me fight this suburban dictator. These weren't just soldiers. They were a finely tuned instrument of skill, wrapped in desert camo and righteous fury. Sergeant Miguel Wrench Ramirez, our mechanic, cracked his knuckles. "So we're taking down a wannabe queen who thinks she can rob soldiers of their homes. I've been waiting for this kind of mission my whole career." Staff Sergeant Leah Code Walker, our IT wizard, was already typing away. "Give me 12 hours and I'll know everything about Valerie Kingsley, from her credit score to her Amazon orders." The rest of the team was just as lethal in their specialties. Corporal James Legal Eagle Torres had nearly finished his paralegal certification. Specialist Daniel Hammer O'Brien was a carpenter who could assess damage cost to the dollar. Sergeant First Class Maria Doc Santos doubled as a forensic document expert. Staff Sergeant Anthony Com Williams could run media like a combat op. Private First Class David Demo Chang, now an electrician, could sniff out illegal work instantly. And Sergeant Rafael Logistics Lopez could coordinate supplies in his sleep. Rebecca Navarro laid out our battle plan across the table like an operations map. Legal track: file complaints with the FBI, State Attorney General, and DA. Document every violation of SCRA. Financial track: a forensic accountant to trace every stolen cent, freeze Valerie's assets before she could move them. Media track: coordinate with sympathetic journalists, Military Times, local TV, veteran advocates. Community track: rally other victims into a class action lawsuit. direct action. Peacefully reclaim my property with public support and legal backing. Here's your knowledge nugget. Every HOA member has the right to inspect annual financials. Most fraud only thrives because no one bothers. Code uncovered Valerie's biggest weakness, her ego. She bragged on Facebook about cleaning up military housing, even posting photos of properties she forced into foreclosure. She'd practically built a self-incriminating highlight reel. We created fake buyer personas to waste her time and gather evidence. Hammer inspected the damage to my house. Demo checked Jeff's electrical work, unpermitted and unsafe. Meanwhile, the community itself was waking up. A military spouse started a Facebook group called Justice for Noah, which ballooned to 800 members in 2 days. Businesses put up "Support Our Veteran" signs. The mayor's office was bombarded with calls for an investigation. Wrench even helped relocate the innocent tenant family temporarily, proving we weren't out to punish them for Valerie's crimes. But Valerie wasn't slowing down. Code intercepted her emails. She was panicking, forging backdated incorporation papers, bribing a notary named Janet Cruz to falsify dates. Worse, she tried to sabotage county records with a staged water leak. The FBI already had copies. Her brother-in-law Jeff was caught on hidden cameras vandalizing my house at 2 a.m., smashing windows, flooding the basement, muttering, "Valerie said make it look natural." The footage was crystal clear. Conspiracy charges, handed to the FBI on a silver platter. And then came the smear campaign. Valerie spread rumors I was unstable, claimed PTSD made me dangerous, forged psychiatric reports, even sent anonymous letters to my commanding officer. She fabricated social media posts alleging I sold weapons on the black market. For 72 hours, my career hung the balance, but military investigators traced everything back to her IP address. Instead of destroying me, she added federal charges for filing false reports against a service member. The climax was set for the monthly HOA meeting, a meeting that wasn't even legally valid. We invited local press, veterans groups, state officials. Valerie thought she was about to crush me in front of neighbors. Instead, she was walking into her own downfall. The community center was packed. 200 people, 3 TV crews, live streams reaching thousands. My platoon sat front row in full dress uniforms, medals gleaming. We looked like the honor guard of American justice. Valerie strutted in wearing a powder blue suit, briefcase stuffed with forged papers, smiling like she still owned the world. She called the meeting to order with all the pomp of a queen. "Ladies and gentlemen, we must address the threat to our community's safety. Mr. Delgado's abandoned property is a hazard." She projected photos of the vandalism Jeff had caused, claiming it proved my house was unsafe. Then she made her fatal error. "Some people," she sneered, "don't deserve to own property here. Military families treat this as temporary housing, bringing their problems back with them." The room went silent. Cameras clicked. Every word was recorded. That's when Rebecca stood, briefcase in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have evidence to present." The projector lit up with county records, FBI photos, bank statements. She revealed everything: $380,000 stolen, forged documents, unincorporated HOA, mail and wire fraud, targeting of military families. The crowd erupted. Neighbors shouted. Elderly residents cried out, realizing they'd been robbed. Valerie tried to flee, but Deputy Santos stepped forward. "Valerie Kingsley, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." The handcuffs clicked and the room went still. The media swarmed. Flashbulbs, reporters shouting questions. Social media exploded with clips of her arrest. My platoon stood at attention and saluted. Not me, but the principle that justice still mattered. Mrs. Huang handed me a folded flag from my father's grave. Through tears, she whispered, "He'd be proud, Noah. You fought the good fight." The standing ovation lasted minutes. 6 months later, justice was served. Valerie got 8 years in federal prison, ordered to repay $2.3 million. Jeff got 3 years for conspiracy. The corrupt notary lost her license. Even Valerie's PI faced charges for harassment. But the real victory was the community. Together, we rebuilt my father's house. My platoon came every weekend, tools in hand, laughter echoing as we painted, repaired, and restored. In Dad's workshop, I found a note he had hidden. If you're reading this, fight the good fight. Stand up to bullies, protect the innocent, make me proud. The neighborhood formed a legitimate, veteran-friendly HOA with me as president. Our bylaws included protections for military families and full financial transparency. Colorado passed the Service Members HOA Protection Act, and a dozen states followed. I used the settlement money to found the Defenders at Home Foundation, offering free legal aid to military families harassed by HOAs. We've helped hundreds already. And yes, I'm dating Rebecca now. Turns out there's nothing more attractive than a woman who can bury your enemies in court with citations. Every summer I host the Freedom BBQ in my backyard. Veterans, neighbors, even the tenant family who got caught in the crossfire, all are welcome. We planted a blue spruce for my father, strong and unshakable. As kids play where I once learned resilience, I know this: bullies fall, but communities built on honor last forever. So tell me, what's your HOA nightmare? Share it in the comments. You're not alone. Together, we can fight back. And subscribe, because next week I'll tell you how one teacher exposed her principal's embezzlement using nothing but cafeteria receipts and pure grit. Sometimes the system breaks good people, but sometimes good people break the system right back.